Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my Wick, Flickershade, Necromancer, Spectre build. Now, I say Wick in case you don't know, with Spectres, it fundamentally changes how Spectres work. It changes them from a permanent minion, which is a very good thing, to a non-permanent minion. They have to be summoned, which can be bad for a number of reasons and hard to deal with. The upside is you get +2 maximum, which is a massive boost, because normally you get to 5 or 4 max Spectres, so +2 max is a big deal. And on top of that, you get 1,000% crit chance on those Spectres. So it's very easily to crit cap these Spectres when you have that much percent crit chance just being pumped into them right out of the get-go from one jewel socket. Now, they have a 20-second duration. What are the downsides of not having permanent? Well, to begin with, you have to regularly summon these throughout the mapping experience. And how do you consistently get a good Spectre? Because the reality is, you could do your desecrate and you could get, for example, a bunch of skeletons, which are terrible Spectres. They do pretty much no damage, and ultimately your buff of having +2 max Spectres and 1,000% crit chance is going to get rendered useless because you keep getting bad Spectres. Now, I'm specifically building around Flickershade because with the alternate quality of desecrate, as says chance for corpse to spawn to be a forgotten corpse, it says 20% chance. Forgotten Corpse is a very specific corpse. It is, if you see right here when I summon or I do desecrate, you'll see these purple guys on the ground. Those are called Flickershades. Those are the Spectres I'm using, which, as far as Spectres go, I'm not a Spectre guy. I don't know what their power level is compared to other Spectres. I just made a build with them because they were a reliable thing I can consistently get while mapping. Because if I have an Ashes and I have an Enhance, if I had a +1 socketed gem here, if I had an Awaken Enhance, it could get higher, but you can see here it has 74% chance to be a Forgotten Corpse, and I believe the Spectres you currently have summoned also influence your likelihood of that Spectre to be shown up again, so it ends up being a lot more consistent than just 70% chance that it summons the corpse I want. And I'm in hideout, so there's not as many corpses to pull from right now, so it's extra weighted in hideout, but while you're mapping and you have these guys up, you'll notice that they're fairly consistent on summoning, so it's not so much of a matter of I have to pick and choose and try to make sure I just summon the very correct thing very meticulously. I actually can pretty much just throw down Desecrate, not really care what I'm summoning, and more than likely I'm going to have 5 out of 6 of these guys be the correct Spectre, or even 6 out of 6 of them, and especially while I'm doing a boss fight and I have time to set up when they're doing dialogue options, I'll have plenty of time to basically desecrate a few times and I'll see, okay, that's all Flickershades. I can go over here and I can summon them, and obviously I have my bone offering on a trigger, but you get the idea. I can forcibly get pretty much the right minions out consistently. So that's the idea behind what we're doing. And then as for how I chose to scale this build, Spectres you can get a lot of levels on, so I just said screw it, I'm just gonna add a bunch of levels on them. I'm pretty sure, or I'm not pretty sure, I don't really know, to be honest. My guess is that Spectre levels, they get less and less valuable, or at least that's how it works with spell skills. Like at level 30 you go from 10% more each level to about 5% more. Maybe that happens with Spectres, maybe it doesn't, I don't freaking know. But point is, I got a +2 Dialas, and then an Empower, and then a Raised Spectre that's level 39. I could actually get this to level 40. I could get it beyond level 40. I chose for quality of life things. Like, for example, I could have a +2 weapon and I'd be at 40, but I'd rather have shield charge. I'd rather move around very quickly and have nice quality of life, so I didn't do that. I could have a Awakened Empower for another plus level, but I can't afford that. I'm not that rich. I could have an Awakened added Chaos. I didn't really do the math. I didn't go check out the Spectre's base damage. For all I know, an Awakened added Chaos is a great link I just assumed it probably wouldn't be a great link because I'm getting them all the way to level 39. Maybe the base damage wouldn't be relevant at that point, but I don't freaking know. I'm just rolling with it, and this is what I went with. So I have a Dialas with +2, and then a bunch of plus levels. +2 on our wand. We got +2 from the helmet. You can actually get +2 raised Spectre gems on your boots, which is pretty cool for an elevated suffix mod. I, of course, awaken that with avoid poison and bleed to basically give me some mitigation against poison and bleed. Of course, I got stun and block because that's what you usually get when you combine 2 elevated pairs of items. You get stun and block just because it's such a great stat and you love having it on your suffix pool. But regardless, that's the approach I took for scaling this build. And then on top of that, I have a setup with essentially some zombies and a stone golem. Stone golem for the regen. Stone golem's giving me about 200 flat regen, which is pretty sick. The alt quality shenanigans with ashes, I just love this item. I don't use it too much more recently just because I view it as super expensive, so I don't like to include it in my builds, but this is more of the end league. This is a more high investment build. This is about 100 to 150 divine build. I wanted to splurge a little bit, and it really makes the build work because of the importance on phantasmal desecrate and the value you get of alt qualities. You get buff effect from stone golem. You get your raised spectre to have another 30% life and 30% melee damage. You get, anomalous purity of elements with more aura effect. You get bone offering with more block. You get assassin's mark with more chance for them to generate power charges. I probably should have gone the alternate quality assassin's mark that makes enemies take increased damage, but whatever. You get purifying flame that makes enemies take 12% increased damage. You get anime guardian. The diversion of this actually gives a bunch of life. So even though I don't particularly have a super defensive tree, like I haven't gone very overkill on minion defenses, I have bone offering, which is almost at capping the minion's block, and then on top of that, my alt quality anime guardian gives me 148% monster life on this anime guardian, and between that meat shield and some pretty basic anime guardian gear, ephemeral edge, or not, garb of the ephemeral, kingmaker, a crown of the tyrant for -res, a plus curse, despair curse, vixen's entrapment to get despair in the build, and then boots that just had bleed, avoid, brittle, and some regen. This guy only got to like 90% HP when I did 7 ubers. Like, he didn't come close to dying. I'm guessing he probably could have walked into a Seer Storm, and if I was completely asleep at the wheel, he could have died, but it was pretty easy to be like, okay, I see my minions walking into a storm, let me convocate them and get them back to me. It's on like a 1-second cooldown or something. 1.5, it doesn't take long for it, and it just had no issues with the survivability of this at all. I'm sure there are probably some things that can kill Animate Guardian, and I'm sure there's more defensive setups I can do, but I just went for a pretty offensive setup, and I had no issues whatsoever with this guy dying. My guess is maybe, I've heard from people in chat, they were telling me that DD Strongbox could kill Animate Guardian, so maybe that would be the way we'd rip him, but overall, the Ashes plus the Enhance that I was already using on Desecrate ended up with a pretty tanky Animate Guardian. And then last but not least, we have a zombie, and this is specifically just to get Withering Touch to inflict Wither on the build. I probably could go for a Withering Step. Maybe that'd be worth more than going for Purifying Flame for like more single target. I don't really know. I just went for Purifying Flame because regen, a little bit extra damage. That sounded nice to me. Okay, so that's the idea behind the character. Everything else is mostly pretty standard stuff, I think, in terms of these nodes are good minion nodes for damage. I went for 1 Unending Hunger so I could get some, I guess, Soul Eater on my Spectres to make them clear better. I'm not sure how much that makes a difference. I think it helps a decent amount. I'm not too sure. I've just been playing with it and seems pretty solid. And then the classic 12 passive minion clusters. Now, my 12 passive minion clusters are basically, they're kind of settled clusters. They're 3 passive clusters, so originally, I was like, okay, I'm going to go Fracture 35%, and I'm going to make a really good Jewel. Well, I did this, and I had all res, I had attack and cast speed, and then I augmented on 4% damage, which doesn't help my minions at all, but quite frankly, to me, this is still like an S-tier Jewel, because I could use that in a like attack-based character, and I don't have the heart to roll over it, because it still is really good for another build. So it's basically a 3-mod Jewel, and then I had another Fracture where I was just didn't really feel like crafting anymore, and I took 2 T2 mods and I called it a day. This is basically, I would recommend not trying to get a Fracture. Try to buy basically a cluster of similar value, anywhere from like 5 to 10 Ds. You can probably get a 3-mod cluster with similar effects, and you'd probably be just as good as this current setup here without the Fracture. The Fracture is really what you want if you're trying to get all T1 mods and actually take the time to do the reforges and the exalts and annulls to finish it up correctly, but I was a little bit too lazy when it came to that extent of finishing the jewel. Anyways, so this is my attempt at a Soul Spectre. All in all, I had a pretty good time with it. I don't know how this would feel on a budget. It feels decent on a good amount of currency. I did all Ubers. The only Uber I died to is Exarch. Technically, I died once to Maven because I wasn't paying attention, and I logged out during a memory game, so I could probably count that as a death too, because I failed the memory game. Of course, I logged back in and I had to do the same memory game, and I did it fine, but maybe you count that as a death because in softcore, you should just run the timer out, let it kill you, and respawn or whatever, I guess. And as for defensive layers, I went for the suppress node, block node, life. This AoE node doesn't really do anything for us. I was going for bleed avoid, but the chain broke, and I didn't really feel like trying to do more than 3 mods because I was kind of burnt out on Crucible. So you get suppress on your shield there, you get benchcraft suppress, you get suppress on your helmet, and I think that's the only items on my gear pieces I have suppress on. And then I just have this suppression wheel here with lucky suppress. This ends up being effectively about, I think it's like 85 to 90% spell suppress, effective spell suppress, which is very, very feels good environment, especially when combined with the fact we have, let's get the offering to trigger, especially when combined with the fact we have a 72-53 block, and then if we have our roomies up, then we have 65-75. So while mapping, I pretty much have 65-75 spell block. And then on top of all of that, we also have the ES Mastery with a Blood Notch and Immutable Force, a Life Flask for backup, and the regen from Stone Golem. So it ends up feeling quite clean for the most part. Not the most high-end tanky build, but it's pretty freaking good. Alright, I'll go ahead and give you guys a little showcase of a... Let's see what map we can do. Maybe we do like a... I don't know, maybe a Hydra. Oh, that's un-ID'd. That's un-ID'd, whatever. I think we just throw this thing on un-ID'd. I think that should be fine. I don't think it really matters if it's un-ID'd. I think we can run pretty much every single map mod. And we should be fine. The only map mod that's going to be a little bit annoying is no regen, because it will brick our ability to summon specters, right? But it should be fine. And you'll notice throughout here, I'll summon, while I'm running through the map, I'll summon a couple specters that aren't the correct types, right? Because I'll be running through, there's a lot of corpses on the ground while I'm running. I try to desecrate where there aren't enemies. Like right here, there's not enemies. I'll desecrate here, try to summon a couple, and that gives me mostly the Flickershades I want, but still, randomly you'll get some specters that aren't Flickershades, and it should be mostly fine, and I'm going to cut the sail out. Sorry about this. This is awkward. And where was I? I was clearing the map. But as you can see, if you were thinking, oh, Solwick specters are too awkward to play, how is that even doable? It ends up being completely fine just because of the ability to consistently summon essentially the guy you want with the Flickershade and Forgotten Corpse. Now, I'm pretty confident, based on the fact that somebody showed me some videos of Frostbearer specters. I can say with almost 100% certainty, these are not the best specters. Like, the Frostbearer dudes, the video I saw of them, they seem absolutely insane. Granted, it was on a character with much better gear than me, but still, they seemed cracked in terms of damage, in terms of clear. They're permanent, they have all the feels good. This is definitely more of a, you have to be a little bit aware of what you're doing. Like, you have to summon guys every now and then. I think it's still pretty relaxing and still a lot less work than most regular builds where you actually have to, like, attack and actively target where you're shooting and stuff like that. But it still is not going to be as high of quality of life of a normal Spectre build, like Frostbearers, for example. That being said, purple animations, I think they're pretty cool. And essentially, my main goal of this build was to see if Flickershades could actually be essentially like just pretty good specters, right? That was the main thing I wanted to find out. And my takeaway is they absolutely can be, from playing the build and from testing it on different levels of content. Maybe this showcases that, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're convinced, maybe you're not. I'm not really a minion guy at the end of the day, so I'm sure there's many things that I am not necessarily doing correctly or could do better, but I just look at a lot of things in PoE as experiments or fun things to test out to see if they can be done and if they can make actually pretty good and fun builds. And that's what Flickershades has been for me. I've enjoyed it, even though it might not be my top playstyle because I'm not like a big minion guy, right? It still's been pretty fun. And then this is what it looks like on a boss like Hydra. Not quite enough damage to instantly phase, or maybe if I got a little bit more lucky with attacks, we would have instantly phased Hydra, but close enough. I mean, it's pretty good damage, and this is our non-single target setup. The only thing I change between single target and non-single target is multi-strike if I wanted to do Ubers. Everything else, like the alternate quality of minion speed makes them do their earthquake attack more often because that is a cooldown based attack, and that's that cool purple earthquake. So I just like to run with this because they flicker around and do that cool earthquake, purple earthquake. Other than that, I would say minions are aggressive fracture. This is very expensive to do. There were very few minion aggressive. I had to self-fracture this. I would say if you're trying to do this build on any level of budget, the one other caveat of things you're going to have to be a little bit cheaper on is you're probably going to have to go for like fractured minion and cast and attack speed. And instead of this, instead of basically, I don't know, you could drop melee fizz, you could drop minion speed, you could drop a couple of these and go for essentially feeding frenzy, and that way you would have the Flickershades being aggressive. They might clear fine without it, and maybe I was just noticing in the boss fight, maybe Deathmark is the play you go with. Maybe if you just have Deathmark, maybe they'll be consistently attacking the boss, and then it's fine, and maybe they clear fine without it. But you'd have to test it yourself and kind of see. I felt while I was leveling up the build, before I got the minions are aggressive, I felt like it was fine. But I went into a boss fight to test the difference between minions are aggressive and non-minions are aggressive. And basically, if the boss was like here and I was like here, they wouldn't go and attack the boss. So it's more or less a thing of you have to do Deathmark if you're not using minions are aggressive to have them target. And then while you're mapping, you're going to have to probably consistently convocate them to get them to attack the enemies next to you, stuff like that. But that's my takeaway, or that's my take on a Spectre build with Wick, which is a jewel I've always looked at. I'm like, man, that seems kind of cool, but man, would that be hard to use? And I have to say, the tech of using Forgotten Corpses is pretty cool. We mostly got inspired by somebody in our Twitch chat told us to check out Wick. They were talking about doing zombies, and then we just checked PoE Ninja to see, is anyone even using Wick? And they were using the approach of Phantasmal Desecrate. So shout out to the one guy on PoE Ninja doing Phantasmal Desecrate. We definitely built this character quite a bit differently than he did, I believe. But we did steal his Phantasmal Desecrate. So shout out to the one dude on PoE Ninja that was doing this. You absolute mad scientist. There's so many people in PoE doing interesting, fantastic things. I love the addition of... It's no longer a limit to 15,000 characters, that only 15,000 level 100s. It actually is pretty much anyone can add their character to PoE Ninja. In this league, there was like 100,000 characters that were level 90 and above. There's a great resource where you can check and look for so many different things. I used to think PoE Ninja's a little bit too limited because it had that character limit and it was only the level 100 people, and you're missing out on a lot of great tech. But now it's just a lot more cool things out there, and I'd recommend just scrolling through. There's some cool builds. Anyways, as always, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the build. Take care, Exiles, and peace out.